This was supposed to be a normal walk home, but it turned into a nightmare. An elderly black woman walked slowly down the street with a small grocery bag in her hand. Her back was bent, her steps were weak, her face showed years of hard work and pain. Suddenly, a police siren screamed behind her. She froze, her bag slipped from her hand, bread rolled across the road. "Stop right there," an officer shouted. I didn't do anything," she whispered. People stopped walking, cars slowed down, phones came out, a crowd formed. "You match the description of a suspect," the officer said. "Suspect?" she cried. "I just bought food and medicine." They searched her bag like she was dangerous. They grabbed her arm. They pushed her toward the police car. "Please, my legs hurt. I can't stand," she begged. "Sure," one officer laughed. Tears rolled down her face. Her chest hurt. Her heart raced. "I raised children. I saved lives. Why are you doing this to me?" she cried. The crowd shouted, "Leave her alone!" But the officers didn't listen. Her hands shook as she reached into her pocket. "Can I make one phone call?" she whispered. "You got 1 minute," the officer said, impatient. She pulled out an old phone with trembling fingers. "Son, it's me," she said. "They stopped me. They think I'm a criminal," she whispered softly. An officer laughed. "Calling your boyfriend?" The woman lifted her head slowly. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were strong. "No," she said quietly. "I'm calling my son." The officer smirked. "And who is your son?" She took a deep breath. "He is the U.S. Attorney General." The street froze. The crowd gasped. The officers laughed, but not for long. Minutes later, black cars arrived. Men in suits stepped out. One tall man rushed to the crying woman. "Mom," he said. She collapsed into his arms, crying hard. The officers turned pale. That moment changed everything. What started as humiliation became a battle for dignity. Stay till the end, because this woman's courage didn't just save her life, it exposed a truth the whole world needed to see. And the ending will leave you in shocked silence. Welcome to Heroic Stories Hub, where real courage meets powerful truth. Here, you'll hear emotional stories of ordinary people facing impossible moments and rising with dignity and strength. If you believe in justice, humanity, and unforgettable stories that touch the heart, you're in the right place. This is Heroic Stories Hub, where every story has a hero. This was the moment the street turned into a scene of fear and humiliation. The sound of a police siren ripped through the quiet afternoon. An elderly black woman was walking slowly down the sidewalk with a small grocery bag in her hand. Her back was bent from years of hard work, and her steps were careful and slow. Sweat shined on her forehead as she paused to catch her breath. Suddenly, a police car screeched to a stop right beside her. Tires screamed, doors slammed open. "Hey, stop right there," one officer shouted. The woman jumped in fear. Her grocery bag slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. A loaf of bread rolled onto the street. I didn't do anything," she whispered. Her hands shook as she lifted them halfway in the air, unsure what to do. People nearby turned their heads. A man at a bus stop stood up. A woman outside a shop covered her mouth. Phones came out. A crowd slowly began to form. "You match the description of a suspect," the second officer said while stepping closer. The woman blinked in confusion. "Suspect? I just came from the store," she said softly. One officer walked around her like she was dangerous. "What's in the bag?" he asked sharply. "Just food and my medicine," she replied. "Open it." With trembling hands, she bent down and picked up the bag. Her knees shook as she opened it. Bread, milk, and a small bottle of pills spilled out. "My heart pills," she said quietly. The officer picked up the medicine bottle and shook it. "Drugs?" he said with a smirk. "No, it's for my heart," she cried. He laughed. "Sure." The second officer grabbed her arm suddenly. "You're coming with us until we sort this out." The woman stumbled forward and almost fell. "Please," she begged, "my legs hurt. I can't stand long." The crowd reacted. "Leave her alone," a young man shouted. "She's just an old lady," a woman yelled. One officer turned to them. "Mind your business," he snapped. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she struggled to breathe. "I worked all my life," she whispered. The officer tightened his grip on her arm. "Move." Her body shook. "Please don't hurt me," she said. The crowd grew larger. A child started crying after seeing her cry. The officer pushed her toward the car. She winced in pain. "I didn't steal anything," she said louder now. "Quiet," one officer ordered. Tears streamed down her face. Her voice cracked. "I'm just trying to go home." One officer searched her pockets roughly. "Where's your ID?" She shook her head. "It's at home. I don't carry it when I buy bread." "That's suspicious," the officer said. The woman felt dizzy. Her knees weakened. "I need to sit," she whispered. "No sitting," the officer said. She closed her eyes for a second and almost collapsed. A man from the crowd stepped forward. "Sir, she needs help," he said. "Back up," the officer shouted. The woman's breathing became heavy. "I raised children. I helped sick people. Why are you doing this?" she cried. Her voice echoed in the silent street. One officer leaned close to her face. "Stop acting." "I'm not acting," she shouted suddenly. Her hands trembled as she reached for her coat pocket. The officer slapped her hand away. "What are you reaching for?" "My phone, please," she begged. The officers looked at each other. "You get one call," one said. She pulled out an old phone with shaking fingers. The screen cracked. Her hands were so weak she dropped it once and picked it up again. Her lips trembled as she pressed the numbers. "Son, it's me," she said quietly. The crowd leaned in to listen. Even the officers paused. "They stopped me. They think I did something wrong," she whispered. She listened to the phone. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "I'm scared," she said. One officer laughed. "Calling your boyfriend?" he joked. Another officer added, "Maybe he's a lawyer from T." The air felt heavy, like the whole street was holding its breath. The officers stood stiffly in front of the elderly woman. One of them crossed his arms and laughed loudly. "You really expect us to believe that?" he said. The woman did not answer him. She kept the phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her hand was shaking, but her voice stayed firm. "They won't let me go," she said softly into the phone. Her eyes filled with tears again. "I'm on Maple Street, near the grocery store." She listened for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, I'll wait." The call ended. One officer clapped his hands together sarcastically. "Well, that was cute," he said. "You think some big shot is coming for you?" the other officer added. The woman lowered the phone and held it against her chest. Her knees were still shaking, but she stood tall. "I told him where I am," she said quietly. "Good for you," one officer replied. The crowd whispered among themselves. "Do you think it's true?" a woman asked. "Maybe she's lying, Or maybe she's not, another man said, nervous. The old woman closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Her chest hurt, her legs hurt, her heart felt like it might burst from fear. "I just wanted bread," she whispered to herself. Minutes passed. The officers grew restless. "All right, enough waiting," one officer said. He grabbed her arm again. She cried out in pain. "Please don't touch me like that," she begged. The crowd reacted loudly. "Leave her alone," someone shouted. "She made a call. Let her wait," another voice yelled. The officer turned toward the crowd. "Step back," he commanded. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine broke the tension. A black car slowly pulled up to the sidewalk. The crowd went quiet. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They did not look like regular people. They stood straight and scanned the area. One of them spoke loudly. "Which officers are in charge here?" The police officers froze. "Who are you?" one officer asked. The man showed a badge. "Federal Security." A wave of shock ran through the crowd. Shocked murmurs. The woman's eyes widened. "He came," she whispered. Another black car arrived, then another. Doors opened. More men in suits stepped out. The officers began to look nervous. "What is going on?" one officer muttered. Then a tall man in a dark blue suit stepped forward. His face was serious, his eyes locked onto the elderly woman. "Mom," he said softly. Her body shook when she heard his voice. "My son," she cried. She dropped her phone and rushed toward him, almost falling. He caught her and held her tightly. "I'm here," he said. She clung to him and sobbed into his chest. "I was so scared," she whispered. He closed his eyes and held her tighter, angry but controlled. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The man turned slowly toward the officers. "Which one of you detained my mother?" he asked, calm but dangerous. One officer swallowed hard. "We did, sir." "On what reason?" the man asked. "She matched a description," the officer replied weakly. The man looked down at the grocery bag on the ground. Bread, milk, medicine. "You handcuffed an elderly woman carrying groceries?" he asked, disbelief. No one answered. "You scared her," he continued. "She has a heart condition," he added. The woman spoke from behind him. "I couldn't breathe for a moment," she said, shaken. The man's jaw tightened. "Did you search her?" he asked. "Yes, sir," the officer said, ashamed. "And what did you find?" he asked. "Nothing illegal," the officer admitted. The man stepped closer to the officers. His voice did not rise, but it felt heavier. "My mother spent 40 years working as a nurse," he said. The next morning, the world saw her face. The video spread across the internet like fire. Millions of people watched the elderly woman shaking as police officers surrounded her. They heard her weak voice say, "I didn't do anything." News channels replayed the moment again and again. Her grocery bag falling, her tears, her phone call. People everywhere felt anger and sadness at the same time. In her small living room, the woman sat quietly on an old couch. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of warm tea, but they still trembled. "I can still hear the siren," she whispered. Her son sat beside her. "You don't have to watch this," he said gently. "But they need to know what happened," she replied. Reporters waited outside her house. Cameras pointed toward her front door. When she finally stepped outside, the crowd fell silent. "Ma'am, how do you feel?" a reporter asked. She looked down at her hands. "I feel tired," she said. "Tired of being scared when I go to buy bread." Another reporter asked, "Are you angry at the officers?" She paused, her eyes filled with tears. "I am not angry," she said softly. "I am hurt." Her son stepped forward. "No mother should need power to be treated with respect," he said. The reporters went quiet. Later that day, officials announced the officers had been suspended while an investigation began. The woman heard the news from her kitchen radio. "They are suspended," the voice said. She closed her eyes. "Maybe this will stop it from happening again," she whispered. That evening, she sat alone in her bedroom. The house was quiet, too quiet. She touched her wrist where the handcuffs had been. It was still red. "I used to hold newborn babies with these hands," she said to herself. She looked at an old picture on the wall. It showed her in a nurse's uniform, smiling proudly. "I helped people," she whispered. Tears fell onto the floor. The next morning, she decided to do something brave. She picked up her grocery bag again. Her son rushed to her. "Mom, you don't have to go out yet," he said. "I do," she replied. "I hide, they win." He walked beside her down the same street. Every step felt heavy. She heard a car engine and flinched. Her son placed his hand on her back. "You're safe," he said. When they reached the store, people stopped and stared. A woman approached her slowly. "You are very brave," she said. The old woman smiled weakly. "I was just trying to go home." Inside the store, the cashier wiped her eyes. "I saw what happened to you," she said. "I'm so sorry." The woman nodded. "Thank you." As she walked out with her groceries, a little girl ran toward her. "Are you the lady from the video?" the girl asked. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied. The girl hugged her leg tightly. "You're not bad," she said. The woman began to cry again. Her son turned away to hide his tears. That night, letters arrived at her home from people across the country. One letter said, "You reminded me that my grandmother deserves respect." Another said, "I promise to treat others better because of you." She read each one slowly. "They saw me," she whispered. Days later, she stood in front of a microphone at a community meeting. Her voice shook at first. "I am not special," she said. "I am just old." Laughter and tears filled the room. "But what happened to me can happen to anyone," she continued. "Fear turns people into enemies. Kindness turns strangers into family." The room erupted in applause. Her son watched from the back with pride. That night, she sat on her porch and watched the sunset. The same street, the same air, but everything felt different. "I thought that phone call saved me," she said quietly. "But it saved more than me." She looked at the sky. It showed the world what dignity looks like. A police car drove past slowly. She froze again. Then it slowed and stopped. An officer stepped out. Her heart raced. "Ma'am," the officer said gently, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Tears filled her eyes. "I hope you forgive us," he added. She nodded slowly. "I forgive," she said. The officer walked away in silence. The woman exhaled deeply. Fear had once followed her home, but now courage walked beside her. She stood and held her grocery bag again. "I am not a suspect," she said to herself. "I am a mother. I am a citizen, and I deserve respect." The street grew quiet as the sun disappeared. What began as humiliation became a lesson for the nation.